there's the common analogy of finding firemen at a fire and blaming the firemen. So, they're finding bacteria in diseased tissue and they're blaming the bacteria when the bacteria are part of the healing processes. They're part of the cleanup crew to get rid of the stuff. So we started looking into that, which turned into a deep dive and finding that these germs don't make us ill and that the body works in a very different way from the way we're told, that the body is actually self-healing. So, for example, in a chemotherapy trial, people on the placebo group were manifesting the symptoms of chemotherapy drugs, like, vomiting and losing their hair.
Hey Dawn,
Hi, Adrian. How are you?
I'm great. How about yourself?
Yes, fine, thank you. Yes,
That's the way.
definitely. Yeah, got some sunshine today, so that's always good. Always helps, doesn't it, with some
Yeah,
sunshine?
absolutely. Well, what part of you're from England, is that right?
I am in England, yes, just north of London.
Yeah, right.
So
Nice. Yeah,
not
how often do
not
you
in
get
the
the
big.
sun?
It varies. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's England. We have a mixture of. No, I mean it's not been too bad this spring. It's not always consistent. Although
Yeah.
there are a few places where they say, if you don't like the weather, wait a minute. So it's not just
Yeah, is that
here.
right?
Yeah, I heard somebody say that's the same of Texas.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
look, I mean, here in Australia, I'm from the East Coast, so we get like really good weather sort of all year round, mostly until kind of autumn, and then it starts to get kind of cool and wet and dreary and all that kind of stuff. But for the most part, it's pretty good vibes around here. So plenty of sun to be had every day, which is super important for your health, right?
Absolutely, yes. And if you're near the coast as well, you get the sea, the ozone, the grounding, all of that. So yeah, wonderful.
Yeah,
I'm not that near to the sea.
yeah, right.
Anyway, typical
All of
English
those, what do they
conversation.
call it? Negative ions, is that right? That comes off the ocean?
Yes, yes, definitely. Very good for you. Very grounding.
Hmm.
And that's important because we're electrical as well as chemical, or we're not as chemical as we're made out to be. So we don't need chemicals to fix us, but certainly the right electrical influences, not the non-native EMFs and all of that stuff. So,
Yeah, yeah. Well, we'll get right into that. I guess
mm.
before we do, I mean, it's a pleasure to meet you, and I've been listening to a good deal of your information, particularly in the last couple of months, really, because I saw you once again appeared on Alex Zek's show, and I've seen you be doing great things, and we've recently connected on Facebook and stuff like that. So I'm seeing a lot of good work coming your way. But for those that might be listening and don't know of you or heard of you, I'd love you to share your story, particularly the genesis, I guess, of kind of discovering, I guess, when they lift the veil of health and what health is meant to be versus what we're told it to be. Can you walk me through that transitioning period for you?
Yes, thank you. If anyone doesn't know, I'm co-author of the book What Really Makes You Ill, that came out in December 2019, just before the nonsense that started in 2020.
Hmm.
Um, I wasn't sure. Yeah, being careful for you. Yeah,
No, you
choosing
don't
my
have to be
words.
careful on this show, Dawn. Everyone is on your side. So,
Oh, right. No, this is just, so it doesn't go on YouTube.
oh, yeah, don't worry about that. I've been
Oh, okay.
struck off YouTube that many times. At this stage, I just go with the friendly platforms that
Oh,
allow
right.
me to speak freely. So yeah,
Okay, it's
cut
just
loose.
I'm careful because I'd hate to be responsible for somebody losing their channel because it's important we get the information out. But as you say,
Agreed.
Yeah, I've been on the receiving end of all kinds of censorship and shadow banning. So yes, well, the nonsense that they called COVID at the beginning of 2020. So that helped because that explains that there is zero evidence for the existence of what are called pathogenic viruses, and also other so-called germs, things like bacteria, fungi and parasites. There's a lot of conversations going on about parasites and things like that. But once you start looking into it, there's actually no evidence that they are the cause. They are found when people have these symptoms, but there's a reason for that because they play an active role in helping the body heal. They're not actually the cause. You know, there's the common analogy of finding firemen at a fire and blaming the firemen. So, you know, they're finding bacteria in diseased tissue and they're blaming the bacteria when the bacteria are part of the, healing processes. They're part of the cleanup crew to get rid of the stuff. So, backtrack. It's really been a twofold journey because my personal journey began in the mid-90s when I had a diagnosis of cancer. And again, that's like, you know, being careful with the word because I will use that word. There are places where you have to be very careful. Crazy. And even though I did follow the mainstream and I did go through the standard treatments, at the time I knew intuitively somehow, I don't know how I knew, but I knew that it was something to do with my mindset. There was something to do with me making changes. It was almost like I recognized it as a wake-up call. So I was beginning to implement all kinds of changes, including not necessarily following the mainstream advice, but I was making various changes slowly, admittedly. But also, as I say, my mindset, my whole approach to life, to living. And I was still making changes that I realized I had to make a major change in 2001, which was to end the marriage I was in. And that set me on a whole new path, which led me to actually, first of all, it led me to undertaking a Reiki course. And it was something that I'd never come across that kind of thing before, but I really took to it. And it was really like, oh, this is interesting. And I really felt, I felt it, I was aligned with that. That was, you know, I could do something. And again, healing, it was about healing. And beyond that, that led me to a course that my co-author of the book, What Really Makes You, he was running a course about the nature of reality. And once I dived into that, it was really fascinating. And that was just really pulled me right in. So that gave me, again, a completely different perspective on life. So as we were looking at, so we were running the course and we were looking at turning it into a book. So we wanted to add some extra material. One of those parts of, you know, who are we, what is this body, is about, well, what is health? What is illness? You know, if we, you know, I know it's a kind of often used phrase, you know, we create our own reality. But we are responsible. We are in control of our experiences. So how can we be attacked by these germs, and how can these germs make us ill? So we started looking into that, which turned into a deep dive and finding that these germs don't make us ill and that the body works in a very different way from the way we're told, that the body is actually self-healing. So that's you know, a complete 180. And the more I was diving into so many other systems, not just the medical system, because everything is interconnected. So it was not appropriate to just stay in the medical field. So looking at the other parts of the system, the systems, and realizing that everything is inverted. So looking at everything, seeing all the dots, how they connected, and then putting them together in What Really Makes You Work, which is quite a large book, because it doesn't just cover the basics of health. It does look at what's behind it, some of the history of things like vaccination, looking at what makes us ill, not to scare people, but to say, look, these are the kinds of things that are harming your health. Therefore, we can take responsibility and say, no, we won't expose ourselves to these things. So it's knowledge, it's giving people the knowledge to be able to make informed decisions. So that's why there's a lot in the book, and also about the
Mm.
vested interests, what's behind it, and the big organizations, and also pointing out all their contradictions, once, because that was actually fun to, when they're talking about something somewhere and then you look somewhere else and you think, hang on a minute, can't be both, and it's
Yeah,
like,
that's
oh,
exactly right.
yeah, it was fun to find those. So that led to that book that came out in 2019. And I've continued my diving in because I have been, I suppose, in a way, reintegrating the nature of reality aspect and the role of our emotions. I mean, we do cover things like stress in the book, the role of stress and how that can actually affect our body. At the same time, it's an even bigger topic than just stress. It runs into our emotional sort of psychological habits, and even trauma, ancestral trauma, all kinds of things that can affect our
Mm.
health and simply our beliefs, to the point that if people have a belief that, a certain thing runs in the family, they can believe that and manifest that. And if people think, oh, that's crazy, just look at the placebo effect, which is where somebody can have a beneficial outcome from taking something that's totally inert, just a sugar pill. And the reverse also happens, that people can have an adverse effect from taking something that's seemingly inert if they
Mm.
believe that, there's something associated. So, for example, in a chemotherapy trial, people on the placebo group were manifesting the symptoms of chemotherapy drugs, like, vomiting and losing their hair. And
Yeah,
they'd
wow.
taken a sugar pill. So, the mind is really powerful. So
It's
I've
always been a
really
fascination of mine where they talk about the placebo group and the pill that well the group that took the pill, but they never speak to how miraculous it is that the placebo group actually showed benefits in any way, shape, or form, like and what that attributes to. So, yeah, it's an amazing thing that it's honestly it's something that I've overlooked for so many years until someone pointed it out that like that must have a profound effect on people if they had a sugar pill, but it still had the same impact as what they would taking the pill, or they healed themselves in a certain way. You unpacked a lot of things in that just little intro that you spoke about, right? So let me just circle back to a few things. So I'd imagine, because from what I know, you were diagnosed with breast cancer. That was in the 90s, correct?
indeed,
And
yes.
you would have been treated or at least advised to be treated with chemotherapy and radiation and all that kind of stuff. Would that be true?
Yes, not just advise. I did go through that. So yes,
You went through the chemo and the radiation?
just yeah, just one lot of it. I didn't go. I didn't go back, but yes, I had one series. There was, I think it was such a long time ago. I think it was about 6 weeks. Just one session a week for
Mm,
um, and radiotherapy afterwards,
wow.
and surgery as well. So yeah, so I went through the full works, as it were. So, and that was, yeah, 30 years ago. So
Mm,
I'm living proof it's not necessarily, a death sentence, as many people say. And that's part of it, that, if people are told that, oh, well, if you do that, it'd go, well, not necessarily. At the same time, it does require understanding what you're doing. So I would never say to people, oh, you mustn't do it. But I'd also never say to people, oh, you must do it. Because,
sure.
and again, people have to work out, realize where they are, understand their own belief systems and how they feel for themselves. And that's part of it. People have to take responsibility for their own actions. So, yeah, I mean, I find this aspect of it absolutely fascinating as well. And it's, as I say, really where I'm focusing now, the power of the mind, not just the mind. And when I say mind, I don't mean the grey matter inside our heads. It's much
Mm.
bigger than that. Um,
So what was it that
so,
was
yeah.
speaking to you from an intuitive point of view that was t telling you something wasn't right? Was that do you put that down to an experience or something that was happening during that period, or was it the fact that maybe you were just discovering certain teachers that were coming along at that point? You know, sometimes you go through health scares, or you go through a divorce, or you go through a business breakdown, and everything goes belly up, but all of a sudden you start to have things present to you that are the solutions to all of those problems. And you're like, I don't know where the fuck this was, 6 months ago when I needed it, but here it is now, and I need to pay attention. But even if it did appear, you wouldn't have noticed it because you sort of had the blinkers on. That makes sense?
Oh, absolutely. And so that's a fantastic question. It's so difficult to really go back to where I was in my mindset at the time. I was not happy, but I kept telling myself, "Oh, stop moaning. People worse off than you. Just get on with it. This is life, etc." Um, but I so uh, oh, I'll try and keep it brief. I I'd been married for about 11 years. I had a small child at the time, and but soon after I got married, my mother-in-law, it was a year after I got married, my mother-in-law died of breast cancer. Now,
Mm.
my husband at the time was very close to his mother. So there was a little bit of, oh, I hope that never happens to me, maybe in the back of my mind. Well, say maybe, I think that was there. Generally, I'd always regarded myself as healthy. I mean, not like super fit healthy, but I rarely had anything wrong with me, throughout my life. I'd not had health issues.
Mm.
So I I do see it as I presented myself with an opportunity to see what was, well, to learn something, I suppose. So it's hard sometimes to see that as an opportunity, but I do see these things now as life gifting me a lesson. And of course, it is relevant to what I'm doing and what I'm saying now. So that's why I've started speaking more about it. Whereas at the beginning, I think it's called Survivor Guilt, because it's like
Mm.
so many people die of cancer. So it's like, I didn't want to, go, oh, look at me.
Are
I've been.
you over 40, successful but unfulfilled? Do you feel stuck, like you're not truly living up to who you really are? So many high achievers wake up and think, I'm a good person, I read all the books, I listen to all the podcasts, yet there's something missing. Well, you're not alone. I've been there myself quite a few times. And quite frankly, it took a lot of years of really fucking around, trying to figure out what I now call your higher self blueprint, which has enabled me to live a life and make a living with my passions and my purpose. If you're ready to break free from a life that's holding you back, I'm hosting a free training around the 5 pillars of success that will enable you to create a more meaningful, fulfilling, and purposeful life. So click the link in the show notes, and I look forward to seeing you in the training. But for now, let's get back to the podcast.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
some people
eventually I
wear that as
started.
a badge of honor, and some people shy away from it. But I can imagine, like, if you sound very similar to me in the way that I think sometimes, and it's probably more so in the past than it is now, where I don't want to entertain any sort of dark thoughts for the fear of manifesting whatever that thought might be, right? So,
Totally.
whereas nowadays I kind of walk into it with open eyes, as in there's some darkness that is coming up, whatever it be. It could be a negative thought, it could be an emotion, it could be just a I don't know, like maybe an image or a set of ideas that comes to me that's like the worst case scenario. And I have a tendency sometimes to think of like everything's going to explode and just end abruptly, but I kind of have this doomsday thinking sometimes that I got to walk myself out of. Before I used to say, like, the grass is green, the grass is green, the grass is green, and there's no weeds, right? And just not really pay attention. But nowadays, I kind of walk myself through it and explain in a rational way, understanding my emotions at the same time, and kind of, I guess, help myself diagnose what exactly is going on. So the nature of reality is in this moment of what's actually happening versus what my emotions are trying to tell me. Because sometimes, you know, emotions lie. But is that part of your story as well? Like you just didn't want to sort of think about the cancer because you dealt with it. So rather than speak out about it or say anything in a negative or positive light, then you know you just wanted to kind of detach yourself from that story.
Yeah, yes. I think for a long time I was saying, well, I've got through that, you know, kind of tick the box, got that, you know, pushed it, not so much deliberately pushed it to one side, but as you say, just saying, well, I've got through that. Now let's go, you know, go forward creating life. And I totally agree. And so there is the affirmation side of yes, I'm okay, I'm okay, I'm okay. Whereas inside is going, no, you're not, you know,
Yeah,
your little kind of,
that's
you know,
right.
inner critic going, are you, you know, it's a, are you sure? When
Mm,
it's it's to get to a point where you recognize the that little inner critic saying, are you sure? And recognizing, no, I'm not sure. Looking at the emotions, looking at how you feel, recognizing that, sitting with it, acknowledging it, owning it, and learning what you are telling yourself, if you like, you know, because there's um and again the sort of self, who you are, and you know, there's like so many different levels to this.
mm.
um and at the same time, as I've been looking into things like, you know, parts work, like internal family systems. Have you come across that?
Yeah.
Okay, so there are different parts, and a lot of us try and shut out certain parts, whereas we're then denying an aspect of ourselves that is playing a role. And so it's to not, like you say, not to deny that, to sit with it, to acknowledge and say, okay, there's a message here for me. What's going on? To sit with it, and as I say, acknowledge it, not deny, because then you're denying part of yourself. So you're shutting off part of yourself,
Mm,
which is why I think when people are just doing affirmations now, I mean, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with them, but if you're sitting there going, everything's fine, but inside your little voice is going, oh no, it's not.
yeah.
You
That
know,
needs to
it's
be sorted
recognized.
out, right?
It
Because
needs
there's
to be
something that's
acknowledged. Yeah,
disrupted. Yeah. Do you think, Dawn,
totally.
that there's a link between your breast cancer and your marriage? Do you think that there's a link between the breast being so close to the heart and maybe the heart being not fully expressed or not fully loved or not fully embodied? Or like, is it a part of self-love? Is there anything that you've linked back to how you
Oh,
were thinking, feeling at the time?
I'd, I'd say a lot of that, yes. Which is why in 2001 I realised that the marriage was, you know, it was time to change things, and that was the major change I needed to make.
Mm,
So that, yes, 2001 was a interesting year, but a tough time. Yes, and I do funny things with numbers as well, because I got married in 1984, so it was like the George Orwell book, and then
yeah.
initiated the separation in 2001. So again, 2001. Well, you know, there's 9/11, and then the Space Odyssey. So I was like, okay, I play with, and at the same time, I recognize that, you know, if you like, if you want to put the universe or whatever has a sense of humor. And so it's to see the amusing side of that, and to recognize those pieces
Mm,
of feedback. But yes, I think 100% with what you were saying. Um, and the lack of love, of course, is self-love. So that's what I have been on a journey to learn, for the past, well, 24 years now. So
yeah,
yes, that
wow.
was all part of it, to learn, you know, it's the self-love, because that's where everything starts, from the inside. And yeah, you can't deny those parts of you. So yes, I definitely, I'd say, and that's yeah, 100%, I agree.
Mm. Can you tell me more about the nature of reality? What was it that opened your eyes up to that teaching?
Wow. Huge. One of the phrases that was used in that course, which is the one that just lit up a great big light bulb for me, was the phrase, "You're as dead now as you're ever going to be."
Okay. Tell me more about
Because
that.
because well, as a youngster, I don't know, 10, 11, something like that, sitting in my room looking out of the window and thinking, the eternity, in terms of ordinary evolution, if you like, eternity before me, eternity after me. I'm just this little blip in this huge universe. Again, I have different views now. Just, what is life about? What's this about? Is this, how can it just be so little? And is it meaningful? Is it meaningless? So I remember, but my family were not the sort of people I could just say, sit down and say, hey, what's the meaning of life? So those were things that were, I suppose, sitting in the back of my mind, and I suppose, just kept pushing them back. I said, just what life is, who we are, what is this all about? So going through that course just opened me up just opened up to, I suppose, it aligned with something. There was something inside that said, yes, this feels like how things actually are, rather than the way we're told things are, just this meaningless blip in the world. You're born, you live, you die, end of story. It just felt that didn't feel right, although I had no way of knowing. Externally, I hadn't really studied it, and again, if you look into religions, they're much more control mechanisms and make you think in a certain way. And I'd had questions about all of that, the stuff that goes on in the world, and sort of a loving God, and it's just, how can that be? The man's inhumanity to man, and questioned all of that. And I was never seeing a lot of anger and hatred and the way people treated each other. I was always, why do people do that? Why can't people just get on and be loving and be happy? Why are people mean to each other? It was always a thing for me. So that, of course, when the relevance of your beliefs and thoughts and ideas and how they influence your own experiences. And I think, well, why was I seeing all that conflict? So what was the conflict in me that was then manifesting externally? So with all of that, with the nature of reality, of knowing the role of our own ideas and beliefs and conditioning, it can be scary, because it says, well, okay, the responsibility for our own lives lies with us. But at the same time, I feel it's actually empowering, because it means we can do things. We're not just victims and subject to these external forces. So we're in an interesting time where there's a lot, there are a lot more people being aware of this. And so we're looking at, well, what can we do now to change things, have life to be somewhat different from what it's been in the past, and it doesn't require us to go out and fight the people who are trying to control us. Is actually taking control and creating. So it's just a completely new way of looking at it all, which is fascinating and challenging at the same time.
Yeah, I think that it is a challenging thing, because the way I see it at the moment, I'm not sure if you would agree, but you've got, I guess, I don't know, maybe three camps for argument's sake. I think there's those that are just happy with the status quo and how things are going, and oblivious to, everything's just the way life is. There's nothing I can do to control that. And there's one camp which is probably on the same page as you and I, thinking, what is it that I can do that can improve myself to be in a better position to make an impact on the world and have a ripple effect for everyone else around me? And then I can create a community of like-minded people that we can move forward in this way that is creating new paths and new ways and new systems, and all of those things that people can be happy and in alignment with. But then also, Dawn, and I've talked to this heaps on the podcast recently, that there's these people that seem to be almost on a daily basis just gravitating towards a savior. And so what I see at the moment is these people, well, I'm just when I say these people, I mean I see individuals that, to my knowledge, up until this point, I had known them, had no real affiliation to any religion and no draw to anything. But now I'm just praising God at every moment, and they found God and they've discovered Jesus, and they're looking to the Bible and looking at prophecies, and so they're sort of all in on that, this is the way of the Lord and the Lord's word, and I put my trust in Him and whatever He says, and all those sorts of things, right? So there's sort of like this, I don't know, three paths. Why do you think, in your mind, that people go for towards a religion or towards themselves in the pursuit of the same outcome, really? Do you know what I mean? Does that story
In,
follow? Like they're looking, in my mind, that's those two individuals. If we take the person who's in the middle, who doesn't care either way, and is happy to, just like you're saying before, tread through life and tiptoe their way to death safely. If you take that person out of it, the two people, one that are following God and one that are following um, the path of their own religion, are really looking for the same outcome, I think, but they're on two different paths.
yes, they are probably fairly close in their ideals. But as you say, the path is that they're looking to an external savior. I mean, you could almost say that there's another group that are looking to an external political savior.
Yeah, for sure.
Just looking for someone else to be saving them, doing the things for them, making the changes. There are lots, I suppose there are a number of possibilities of why people think that. It could be because they don't want to take responsibility. It could be because because they fear it, but they fear it, or they have just been brought up with just that belief is so strong that they can't see outside it, that they need someone to tell them that they're doing the right thing. Without I suppose without having deep conversations with each one. I mean, maybe there could be a few reasons. Upbringing certainly would be one of them, having a belief system that they are just fixed with, and sometimes it could be because they think I don't know, maybe they've done, with their life or whatever, they've made mistakes and they need to feel they're going to be saved, or looked after or something, or they're worried for their souls. There's so many aspects to it, really, aren't there? But I think looking to an external. So to clarify, I don't use the term God. However, I fully accept that there is a divine source, if you like, of everything. So there is the divine. I don't give it a gender. I don't say he or she, whatever, because the source of everything is beyond, like, what we call gender. No male, having masculine and feminine attributes, if you like.
Sure.
So that's it's so difficult. So there is a
Look,
divine
it is
source
a
that we are
complex
connected,
conversation.
that we are connected to, we are part of, we are aspects of the divine, seeking to understand experience in this physical reality, if you like. So we are aspects of the divine. So it's not like a separate something that is going to save us. And whether we think we need to be saved anyway, we don't need to be saved. We already are doing what we have at some other level chosen to do, chosen to experience. We are experiencing. So from my perspective, people who think differently are opportunities for me to clarify the way I think about things, or to clarify an understanding, to see if I can actually articulate it in words, because sometimes we can understand something, and finding the words to actually describe it and explain it, because what we're talking about is beyond the physical, so it's actually beyond words. So we have to find the appropriate words to describe what we're talking about. So that's why I'm kind of, with the language, I'm looking at words that don't have too many sort of connotations to them, that people have attached certain meanings to them. So I try and find alternative words, like using divine as opposed to God, because so many people have ideas what God means to them.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it is difficult. I find it hard to put it into words and to put into context, or at least define it in such a way that means two different things. That's why I said before that I think that we're on the same path, and I think about the same thing. It's just really the labels that we give, and it's probably just in my mind, a human desire to put a definition or a finite solution on any one particular thing. I find human beings find it hard to say that they don't know, or they don't understand. And if we look at science and relativity and all these theories that are going about, everything has a a definition, but none of them say we don't know, or very few say we don't know what this is. So, and it's hard because when you start to quantify that in terms of a universal law, so to speak, it's almost like there's a lot. There's a lot that we don't know about. So to know that we've been in existence for such a long time and there's so much that we don't know is it seems like we're just the dumbest species on Earth, right? But I think when it comes to, is there a creator? There has to be. I think there's a full loop that I go in my mind in terms of, well, I don't believe that there is a God in particular, like that is the one that's depicted by, say, mainstream religion, Jesus and all that kind of stuff, right? So but I do feel like when you go full loop and take out God as the creator, there's still a creation at some point. I equally don't believe that something came from nothing, that there was a big bang and then it just all exploded and all of a sudden we have life. I think that is almost as ridiculous as having a man in the sky that's watching down on everything and created everything in 7 days. But I still think that you can't take the creation part away from it. So it still comes full circle to the point where when people say, God is all things and all knowing and ever present, and then we talk about universal and consciousness, and it's all things and all knowing and ever present. And when people say, I talk to God and He answers my prayers, and you and I might say, well, I talk to myself and the answers come back to me in a higher form, or there's a higher version of myself. So I think we're talking about the very same thing. We just give it different labels and different meaning. But to digress, one of the things that you touched on, you
I was
said
going
a
to say,
bunch. Sorry, go on.
yeah, I was going to say, just before we move off from that, just before you said that, I was thinking, and I was about to say, it's about saying, being comfortable with, I don't know.
Sure.
So if people have, God or something, it gives them something that even though they don't know whatever is,
Yeah.
it's still there's a something, because we are conditioned to have answers. And as you say, with science, we have to have answers. And it is really quite important for us to get used to well, I don't know, because the I don't know opens you up to learning more. Whereas if you have sort of fixed ideas, and I'm totally with you on everything you said, Big Bang, and just it's just, when you look at it, it's nonsense. And the explanation, you think, how did we ever fall for that? It doesn't make sense. So much of it doesn't make sense. And that's fine. You say, well, okay, what's the answer? Because one of the things when we say, oh, this doesn't make sense, people say, well, what do you think it is? And it's okay to say, I don't know. You go, well, you have to know. No, we don't. Because, as they say, falsification does not require replacement. We can say that's been disproved. We don't have to supply a replacement theory. We can just say, well, that is not true. It's just like with the whole virus thing.
Yeah.
There's no evidence that they cause disease. Well, what makes me ill? There's a whole load of possibilities, a whole range of possible factors that influence our health. I don't know, and I can never know. In fact, no one can ever know.
Well, you segued into that
Exactly.
beautifully, because that's exactly where my mind was going. We're talking about
Okay.
belief systems, and we're talking about people's perspective, and the internet is just alight at the moment with people questioning and attacking other people's views, not saying that's an interesting perspective. Let me explore that with you to the degree that if I'm inclined to want to know. They're just saying you're an idiot, and they're sort of like, they socially undermine you to make you look like a fool, in place of maybe just entertaining that there's another way that things can be thought of from a different perspective, an angle, or point of view. So let's talk to viruses, because I mean, I know you've spoken to Dr. Andy Kaufman. I've had him on the podcast a couple of months ago. And this no virus theory is interesting to me. I entertain as many ideas as I possibly can about the way the world is and the way that it's depicted to be, and what my perception of the world is at the same time. So, um, you've written about this, right? And you would have had countless sort of studies and references to things that had gone in the past. I'm not sure. Have you ever spoken to Daniel Reuters? Um,
I
he was
know
the
him.
author of
Yes, yes.
Can You Catch a Cold,
Can you
or
catch a
How to
cold?
Catch a Cold?
Yes. No, can you catch a cold? Yes. We did. Yes, we had an interview with him a while, 2, 3 years ago.
Yeah, right.
I will say that at the time of creating the book about the nature of reality that we published in 2010, because we'd already started to take a dive into the virus thing and discovering the work of Stefan Lanka in particular, who had been, I mean, he trained as a virologist, so he would know, and he was saying there's no evidence. So at the same time, we did publish a very small book again in 2010, the title of which is Why Germs Don't Make You Ill and Drugs Can't Cure You. So back in 2010, so we
Wow.
weren't kind of, the newbies in 2020 speaking, we already looked into it and were pretty sure in 2010 that that there was no evidence for viruses. We took a much deeper dive and looked further into lots of different illnesses. Some overlaps with Daniel Reuters' work. Looking at things like Spanish flu, Black Death, that kind of thing, where there was more than enough evidence that other factors could have been involved. So there were other things that could have been making people ill. So we were
Like what?
providing that evidence, saying, here are possible alternative explanations for, and again, not focusing on one, just saying there's a whole range. Certainly there's what's called Spanish flu, or a whole load of factors, and it would have been different for different people in different parts of the world. So, there's a whole load of that involved, and again, it was a world war, for goodness sake. There was a lot of trauma involved in all of that, and all kinds of chemicals, all sorts of new things, and again, trusting the statistics of what they're saying now about what it was at the time.
Yeah.
It wasn't just called flu. So there were different things going on in different places. So it's a whole mixed bag, and lots of, as I say, lots of different reasons in different places. So yes, when our book first came out, we did actually speak to Dr. Kaufman, Andy Kaufman, I think it was in April of 2020, so fairly early on when we first made contact, and it was good to know that he was saying the same thing. So, in terms of what viruses are, see, this is, again, it's to do with labels, and this is how a lot of people are caught and trapped in a certain way of thinking. And like you were saying, a lot of logical fallacies come in, like especially the ad hominem attacks, and just calling people names. Well, you're not addressing the issue. There's no point calling me a conspiracy theorist. What do you, that doesn't address the issue. So let's talk about it, as you say. That's what I think rational people would do. Just, okay, well, that's interesting. I've not heard about it. Tell me more. So the word virus is the Latin for a poison or noxious substance.
Mhm.
So in some ways, that is correct, that in that context, the word virus can be applied to something that makes people ill, because if we're poisoned, our bodies can be damaged and we can have symptoms of what we call illness. But those symptoms are the body healing. So, you know, if you have something, if you eat something or drink something that's bad or off, or, you know, your body will decide it doesn't like it and could well expel it either up or down, and get it out of your body. Now, that doesn't mean you've caught anything. It means your body's saying, get this stuff out of me. I don't like it.
Mm.
So it's not that you're ill, it's your body is giving you a message that it doesn't like what you've just put into it. There's something wrong. So it is responding.
Or there's a
Within
buildup of something that's going wrong and it's trying to get things out, right? Like the
that
way
as well.
I asked Andy to explain it to me like a layman, and he was giving me all these a sort of I guess anecdotal stories about how a virus comes about, or how they determine what a virus or what's causing this particular illness. And honestly, I was like a deer in the headlights when he was explaining the whole thing to me. I should have asked him to explain it like I was, maybe a 2-year-old child. But I think what I understand of it now is that your body, it's not like you have a particular virus, but your body is trying to expel a toxin or something that's not right within the body. So it has certain ways of getting rid of these toxins, and the ways that it does that is, like you said, it either comes out or it goes one end or the other, or it's in the form of phlegm, or it's in the form of pus, or it's in the form of a cyst, or something that is kind of collating all of these toxins and pulling them into an area or expelling them into one thing. So whether it's a pimple or whatever, a rash, or that might be. So yeah, I'll handball it to you because I can't explain it as eloquently as what
Right.
you can, but that's
No,
how I
that's
understand the way virus is. Humans want to give it a name, but to say that you've got the flu, whereas you just have this overload of mucus and phlegm, and your body's excreting certain things from your body in order to get rid of toxins that is unwanted and is disrupting its homeostasis.
yes. I mean that is a good explanation of symptoms,
Hmm.
and the symptoms are there, are the body's efforts to clean itself up, to restore homeostasis. So it
Yeah.
doesn't mean that you have got anything, whatever the label is. It's and this may be the stretch for some people to say, well, actually ignore the labels. You know, whether it's measles, chickenpox, flu, whatever it is, ignore all of the labels, because they are leading you in a path that actually restricts what's going on. And I mean, with the sort of acute conditions, which are the supposed to be caused by some kind of germ, they, for the most part, are self-limiting. But if you get to more chronic conditions like arthritis or asthma or cancer, whatever, those are deeper problems, but they are still manifestations of the body trying to heal itself, because the body is always healing itself. So
Mm.
these disease labels get in the way, and the word virus gets in the way as well. So for me, the simple thing is to say, okay, my body is expressing symptoms. It doesn't mean it's bad. It means my body is expressing symptoms. That is natural. That is normal.
Hmm.
Well, it's the body excretes toxins normally, you know, through the breath or, you know, excretions or whatever. So that's normal. If there's a slightly higher level of toxins or something that the body needs to get rid of, it'll up the level. So that may be where you have mucus, so runny nose or headache or sore throat or diarrhea, vomiting, those kinds of things. The body is just switching up the symptoms because it needs to have a little bit more of a clear out. Sometimes it's seasonal, sometimes it could be to do with the weather. It could be associated with what's going on in your life if you have a buildup of stress. So that puts extra pressure on the body, and the body just isn't functioning as well when it's under stress, or if you're not sleeping, or that kind of thing. So, and sometimes the body is sending you a message to say to get you to rest, because you're just running around, and we aren't taught to rest. So maybe the body will turn up the signal a little bit louder to say, no, you really do need to rest, and it'll do something to make sure you rest. But because we're all different, I can't say what will be for each person. And that's where, we each are different. So we each have to learn what our body is telling us. So that's where the responsibility comes back to say, okay, I've got these symptoms, what's going on? Now, for example, for me, sometimes I will manifest a headache, and that is usually to just, okay, go and have a rest. Time to just swish off, have a rest, do something, do something else, just calm down. That's all it takes for me. It has taken me a while to learn that. Again, because, well, I've got a headache. Why have I got a headache? What have I done? What have I, and it's just, no, it's just time to take a rest. So it's learning to listen to our own body and what it's telling us. When we start putting labels, we're buying into the mainstream system because they want us to think we have something that only they can help us cure, which of course they don't cure anyway, because, well, they know they can't cure anything, and nobody else can use the cure word either. So we then made, again, it's outsourcing our autonomy to someone else, and that's what they want, to keep us under control. So that's another reason why all these labels, so that's are unhelpful. So if we can get away from the labels, say, okay, my body's expressing symptoms, and to keep away from words like virus, because you say, well, it's a virus. You don't know it is. It's a set of symptoms that I'm experiencing. And I think it's sort of simplifying it, because the word virus is used for something. The word virus is sometimes used for the illness. Oh, you've got a virus. Well, no, I've just got symptoms.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? So it's used in ways that are inappropriate. And what, as I say, the original meaning, what the original meaning is, from the Latin, to say poison or noxious substance, which was how the symptoms were expressed. So if you've got boils and lumps and bumps all over your body, then your body's expelling toxins, so it would be expelling virus. So that's how it's been misappropriated and now used to refer to some invisible particle that has never been seen in nature, never been isolated in nature, never been taken from the fluids of a sick person, never been recognized to be associated with illness. It is something that is purely a laboratory artifact, really, that comes out of their cell culture experiment.
Are you over 40, successful but unfulfilled? Do you feel stuck, like you're not truly living up to who you really are? So many high achievers wake up and think, I'm a good person, I read all the books, I listen to all the podcasts, yet there's something missing. Well, you're not alone. I've been there myself quite a few times. And quite frankly, it took a lot of years of really fucking around, trying to figure out what I now call your higher self blueprint, which has enabled me to live a life and make a living with my passions and my purpose. If you're ready to break free from a life that's holding you back, I'm hosting a free training around the 5 pillars of success that will enable you to create a more meaningful, fulfilling, and purposeful life. So click the link in the show notes, and I look forward to seeing you in the training. But for now, let's get back to the podcast.
Yeah. Okay. So I think you've done a good job of explaining that there are symptoms of your body trying to release or get rid of toxins or something that's disrupting your system. But you did mention a little while ago, like there are some chronic illnesses that people go through on a regular basis. So let's say if we take something like I think you mentioned arthritis, or if we take Parkinson's, or if we take a tumor, or if we take some sort of regenerative disease, something that's I think I mentioned the wrong word, degenerative disease, something that's deteriorating the brain or the body, the muscles, or whatever it is. So how do you explain away that in terms of knowing that there aren't any viruses?
Well, quite, I don't think many chronic conditions are actually claimed to be caused by viruses. However,
Yeah.
they are
Or disease.
probably, yes, so they're probably the result of an accumulation of conditions, factors over the course of time.
Mm.
Um,
So am I
and
confusing the two though, Dawn? Am I confusing viruses and disease as two different things? And when you talk to there being no evidence of viruses that exist, does
mm,
that sort of do people conflate the two between like for example, a disease like cancer versus saying that there's no virus. So what actually makes you ill, which is obviously the book that you wrote, right? So can you talk to that a little bit more so I have a better
uh,
understanding of what you mean?
yes, chronic conditions, when you even look at the mainstream, they will say, you will find language like, we don't really understand what causes it. We're not totally sure. The mechanisms aren't completely understood. So there's a lot of there's a lack of understanding of these chronic conditions, and the people whose work I've studied. So I mean, these are not my theories. This is the result of work of people who have looked at health over the course of decades. Going back more than 100 years,
Hmm.
where they weren't dealing with the medical system as it is. They were looking at the way the body works. So if someone has some sort of acute symptoms, you know, that like what we call, say, a cold, so just acute symptoms. If those symptoms are suppressed, so we take things that stop the symptoms instead of allowing the body to express it, it's actually holding in whatever the toxins are and adding more to it if you're using some kind of medicine. And back in the day, there sometimes some of the medicines were made of nasty chemicals as well. So if you're adding extra chemicals, you're building up the toxins in the body. So the body has to employ other mechanisms instead of just the sneezing or creating boils and fever and stuff and whatever, rashes and things. So instead of those symptoms, the body has to say, okay, this is a deeper damage, so we have to employ other mechanisms. So with some cancers, certainly with what they call solid tumors, the idea is that in some cases that the body packages up the toxins to put it somewhere that won't actually damage any major organs, and will put it in a safe place so that when the body is stronger, that it can then break down and deal with that tumor. Now, part of the mechanism of breaking down a tumor and releasing the toxins safely involves bacteria and fungi, which is why some people say, oh, cancer is a fungus. Well, the fungus is there to help break it down. So because we're taught that when we're not well, we go to the doctor and we take medicines to stop what are actually the healing processes, that there's a buildup of toxins in the body, and also we're exposed to toxins in our life. And when I mean, they're not like dangerous, but it's each one probably isn't going to do much. It's just because we're exposed to a lot of them, in the home, personal care products, all sorts of things, the chemicals that are in them once you start looking, also in the food, in the water, in the atmosphere, and what goes on even outside with fertilizers and pesticides, insecticides. These chemicals are designed, a lot of them are designed to, kill the germs. So they're toxic by nature. And a lot of, a lot of little bits, on their own, these little bits of the sort of chemicals that we're exposed to, the body can probably deal with, but together they, they can actually cause a buildup, and that can over time cause damage within the body because it's struggling to function, because it's not, things aren't flowing in the right way. So homeostasis, the body's having to work harder to overcome the toxins that are again upsetting the homeostasis, and that's where there's a buildup of the kind of conditions that could lead to something in the joints, for example. So that could then be what's called arthritis. And people have been able to reverse those kinds of symptoms, or by changing what they use, what they're exposed to, reducing what they're exposed to, minimizing the toxins they're exposed to, and increasing their nutritional level, and also coming out of the stress, if you like, of maybe, oh well, arthritis runs in the family, for example, oh well, I'm bound to get it, just and the stress. So again, stress puts pressure on the body, so it's not functioning as well. So again, it requires more to run, to function optimally, but the stress is draining it of its resources. So then, over time, that's why there's the idea that as we get older, the aging is, the deterioration with age is natural. Well, no, it's only because over time we're exposed to more toxins, and so the body's having to work harder to counter the damage.
Yeah, for
Does
sure.
that make sense? And
It
again,
does.
I can't say what it is because I don't know for any one person, but these are the kinds of factors that can have an impact, that can lead to chronic conditions. And again, the state of the mind as well, our attitude with, even getting older and what's going on in life, if you're always down and everything's bad and, that kind of thing,
Absolutely.
it'll
Yeah, look,
affect.
I
Whereas
think from what I understand, Dawn, is like I, th- I don't think people give enough weight to the amount of stresses and um, factors that are just present in everyday life that are creating a toxic load on their bodies, right? So if you just take it just from a nutritional aspect, well, we know now, and it's quite prevalent and top of the news in terms of trying to get dyes and certain things out of foods, and we all know beyond the shadow of a doubt that there are fast foods, there are things that are good for us, and there are things that are bad for us. So we have at least the knowledge of what is considered to be healthy and nutritious food and what isn't. And the rest of it is just a choice. Maybe it's a matter of willpower. I don't know. Whatever that factor is, the thing is, you can't say you don't know it because we've been taught it all through school and all through lives. We know. So there's that. If you take into account, like you mentioned, there's things that are being sprayed in our skies. There are toxic loads all the times in terms of fumes and scents and anything that we put in our body, deodorants. If you talk about when I talk to Kashif Khan about the amount of makeup that women put on their face, they might have anywhere between, I don't know, 100 and 300 toxic chemicals that are just put on their face. Some of them wear it every day. Some sleep with it overnight. There's so many things that we're sort of flooding our bodies with every day. And I haven't touched on water. I haven't touched on, I don't know, whatever you do for a living, whatever chemical you might use to I don't know, the wax you put on your car or something like that. Like there's so many things that are just polluting our bodies at any one time. And we haven't even touched on the fact that there are stresses in life, like the person that you're married to, and how you think about yourself, how much you love yourself, how much joy and juice and vibration do you get out of life, how many intimate relationships or intimate interactions do you have in any one day? How many times do you laugh in any particular day? Like there's so many things that are conducive to your health in a negative way and also positive. So I guess in saying that, maybe a good way to kind of round out this conversation is from the books that you wrote and from the life that you've lived and the last 30 years of, your own evolution. I mean, to write that book that you did in 2010, and then what makes you ill was the 2019. Is that
What really
right?
makes you ill?
What really makes you ill in 2019, which would have been like how can 2020 have happened and you wrote that book? That was like, if that was not divine timing, I don't know what else was, right?
It was definitely divine timing. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm 100% convinced. Yeah, and
So
I know that. Yeah.
I agree. So now that you know all of that, what is your view on how to live a healthy life? Because particularly when it comes to emotions and your emotional state and things like that, how much of a role do they play? And what does it mean for you now, to be healthy?
Wow, fantastic question. I would say that the role of emotions, attitude, intention, approach, all of that is probably key. It's what underlies the actions you then take. One of the things to make sure is that, when talking about, that we're exposed to all these toxins is not to scare people. It's to bring awareness to um, what we could be taking into our bodies. Now, that gives people a choice. And as you say, certainly with food. And I mean, I know there are lots of different types of diets, and I am not going to go into that one at all. I feel that if everyone ate what I some real food, I mean, it's ridiculous to have to call it real food, things that are grown naturally, not concocted in a factory.
Hmm.
So, like if we stick to real food, that's going to make a big difference to everyone's lives because, like you say, with all the chemicals that are put into food and the dyes and the flavorings and everything else. Um, so it starts with approach, attitude, intention, and ideas because, and also with, if you like, with self-love, because when you start with, self-love, you want to look after yourself more. So you'll be more thoughtful and mindful about what you choose to eat, what you choose to put into your body, and your whole approach is different. And also your actual approach to when you're about to eat, because I say, people say, want to treat themselves to something, say, oh, I know it's bad for me, and then it's like, don't say it's bad for you, because again, that's the intention. And
Mm-mm.
if you've looked at Bader Austin's work and, with water, again, how we approach water, and our bodies are water. So, the way we speak to water, like the Masaru Emoto's work as well, how, and just so much of this it comes from our approach and our attitude, our intention. So that then sort of underlies the actions that we then take. So it's not about being fearful, because the body can manage a certain amount, otherwise we'd all be really ill all the time.
Yeah,
So the
that's
body
right.
can cope with a certain amount. So to start from that point, to love yourself and do, not be hard on yourself. Oh, oh, I've got to be careful, not to come from fear, but to recognize, okay, well, I'll be more careful. I'll have a look at the labels of the products that I'm going to put on my skin, whether it's makeup or personal care. I actually have a look at the it's like, do I really want to put that into my body? And there are plenty of organizations out there producing more natural products. So, some people make them yourself. And, you can do a lot of cleaning chores in the kitchen with things like baking. So, but yeah, bicarbonate of soda and an actual lemon. It's amazing. So,
Mhm.
it's not going back to the old ways, but it's sort of, looking at some of the things. Well, we don't have to use chemicals, and we certainly don't need to worry about killing germs, because so many things are based on killing germs. So it is the approach, your attitude towards things to, get out and about, meet real people, don't live in fear, which is, what they've been trying to do for the last 5 years. So again, do the opposite of that. Yes, relationships with people, being with people, and yeah, it's quite safe to hug anyone, even if they are sneezing, because they are not spreading germs. You see, it's so empowering just to say, when somebody sneezes, oh, keep away. It's like, you've got nothing I can catch.
Yeah.
And you just know that, because so many people, they'll, if in the old belief system, if they believe they could catch something, quite often, then somebody sneeze, oh, I'll get your cold now. Next day they're sneezing. So, see, I caught your cold. No, you didn't. And again, if they say, well, yeah, we see people being ill at the same time. You say, well, okay, if somebody yawns, is there such a thing as a yawn germ?
Sure.
When somebody else yawns? So again, there are energetic aspects to it, and it's understanding we are more than just bags of chemicals. There's the energetic aspect to it as well, and that's being made much more clear with understanding the electrical nature of our body, and also that we are energy. There are frequencies. If you're looking at biofield tuning and sound healing and all these different energetic systems of recognizing that can help us rebalance. Even listening to a beautiful piece of music, or whatever, some music, because we're resonating with that music, and that can harmonize our bodies. So
Yeah, I think even on a very fundamental and basic level, even if you were to experience some of those symptoms of a runny nose, or a cough or phlegm or anything like that that's coming up, rather than saying, oh my God, now, like, I've got a runny nose, and then it's going to turn into a cough, and I'm going to have a massive chest infection. Then I'm going to have a week off work, and all of this sort of manifesting the worst that's going to come up. Rather than saying, oh, like, my body's healing itself, it's getting rid of toxins, I better start, I don't know, having some vegetables, maybe drinking some lemon water, or, just helping it along, do its thing so it can get rid of whatever's disturbing my body at this moment. That attitude shift alone, it helps you get through it. It helps you turn what could be 4 days or 5 days for something to turn around into maybe 1 or 2 days. It could help you heal a lot quicker, on a very deeper level, in terms of that energy and manifesting and intention. I interviewed RJ Spina a couple of weeks ago, and he healed himself. He had sepsis and all these sorts of things that are going on in his body, and he was paralyzed from, like, the neck down, and healed himself within 100 days, and he walked out of the hospital. I hear stories like that too often to deny that the body is just a miraculous healing machine, that we really can't comprehend its ability to a large degree. And I think when you talk to this sort of narrative of, you've got something and it's this label, and now that you've got this label, we need to treat you with all of these other things, and these other things also have symptoms of disease and other problems and challenges that it also created. But you don't have to worry, Dawn, because we also have pills and potions and everything for that as well. And all of a sudden, you're walking around rattling because you've got all of these things inside your system, and your body is fighting tooth and nail, trying to just even get rid of the toxic overload from the medication that you might be taking, as well as whatever else that is fighting inside your system at the same time. And you would know this through going through chemo and radiation and things like that. Your body would be fighting whatever cluster of toxins it put together in your body called cancer, and then the radiation it had to deal with, in the all the other chemicals that are running through your body at the same time. True?
Yes, I would agree, and certainly there's more than enough evidence that the products that they call medications are hmm, are toxic. You know, they certainly add to health problems. And if anyone doubts that, I'd suggest you look up the word iatrogenesis. So, you know, which is
Sorry, say that again. What's that word again?
it's iatrogenesis. So it's the beginning of the iatro, which is the Greek for doctor, and
Uh-huh.
genesis. So it's, you know, it's like doctor caused illness. You know, it's created
Right.
by doctors, and the medical system as I recognized as being the third leading cause of death in the US. You know, there's some studies. I would actually suggest it's almost certainly the top, because the being the third, the first is heart disease, the second one is cancer. And if you look
Cancer.
at those, that if you look at
All the
those,
drug-related illnesses
they will
that go
all
along
be,
with it.
they will all, people who have so-called heart disease will be on various drugs. People who have cancer will have had various drugs. So the chances are that, you know,
Yeah.
and it's not medical error. It's because the chemicals that are used to manage symptoms are not natural for the body. So the body isn't recognized. You know, the body, we don't get ill because we lack statins. You know, so
Mm.
statins can't resolve a health problem, because that's not the reason that we become ill. And that's in order to solve a problem, you have to address the root cause. And so the root cause are all the things that we've been talking about. You know, again, idea, just emotions, ideas, beliefs, fears, as well as the physical substances we're exposed to, and EMFs. Lack of sunshine, again, grounding, you know, bare feet on the ground, whether, you know, on the beach or on the grass or on the ground anywhere,
Hmm.
to be yeah, to not be in fear. I mean, that's not to say, oh, you know, there's nothing to fear, because there are things, but not to fear things that are totally irrelevant. So that's why it's important for me to sort of share the message that germs do not make you ill. You know, there's no evidence. There is no evidence to support the idea that germs make you ill. Let's put it that way. So until somebody comes up with some evidence, we're saying, you know, there is no evidence. There's no, you know, they say, oh, once you look at it, that it's not evidence at all. So it's just association. And it, of course, works for the big pharma, for the pharmaceutical industry.
Absolutely.
And more people are saying, you know, no, we accept that. So, you know, we don't accept that. But yeah, certainly medications are part of the problem, not part of the solution.
So true.
And I'd love to hear about that guy's experience with sepsis, because that's one of the things that, oh, you know, sepsis, it's bacterial. You know, people have antibiotics, and that's the only way to treat it. That's the only way to help them. So I'd love to hear that one, because that's definitely one of the things that's thrown at me in conversation. Oh, what about sepsis? You know, people, you know, oh yeah, they need
Yeah.
antibiotics.
Well,
So
RJ's stories is exceptional. I'll send you after the show, I'll send you the interview that I did with him. But he actually has a video series on his YouTube channel which shows his recovery through the whole thing, and it's worth a look. It's absolutely wild. But again, like
thank you.
not an isolated story. It's one of those things where whether it'd be that or you know someone's had an accident or they've had spinal damage or brain damage or they've had something go wrong, like it's just like beyond any doubt in my mind that I don't think we've even come close to tapping into the human potential of how much we can heal ourselves from within. It's just yeah, it's an absolute amazing and fascinating part of our lives, and I think we've been deluded to thinking that the solutions are outside of us when they're always within, as cliche as that sounds. So, Dawn, I've had a blast with this conversation, and I'm sure a lot of people will be eager to know where to get a hold of your material and your books, and just to at least get a better understanding of what you do and what you're about. Where's the best place to find you? Whereabouts do you house all of that stuff?
Well, What Really Makes You Ill is available on that big platform. It's available on, I mean, you can get it on a number of online bookstores, obviously including Amazon. And it's just the way we published it because, you know, no mainstream publisher was going to touch that. So we self-published, obviously. So the book's available there. I mean, there is a website, whatreallymakesyouill.com, that I mean, it's still there. The book isn't available through that website though, so you know, we chose not to distribute. I joined Substack almost 3 years ago, so I've been continuing to write since June 2022, so the end of June, so as I say, almost 3 years ago now. And I've literally just started my own podcast, which is a little bit daunting, but partly because some people say, oh, you know, people don't want to always read articles. So part of it has been inspired by the idea of creating audio versions of my articles. So I've literally just posted the first one of those. So there's quite a lot of material. Probably Substack is where people will be able to see what I'm doing, where I am, what's going on, and be able to follow me, subscribe to me. You know, there's all sorts of opportunities to connect. So that's dawnlester.substack.com. Lester is Lester. I've called it Dawn's Writings, and the podcast is called Dawn of Discernment, which was yes, I can't claim credit for that one. My very good friend Brandon Thomas was the one who suggested that, so credit to him. And it is, which in fact actually is a word I use a couple of times in that article. I've literally just created an audio version of, which is about divide and conquer. So that's exactly where we started, talking about how we're being divided in, and so there are various ways that we are being made to divide. So, you know, there's the no virus camp, there's the, you know, there's the this, and so being separated. So we argue amongst ourselves, and that plays into the hands of the, you know, as I call them, would-be controllers, because again, with the language, if I call them controllers, then they are. So would-be controllers. So again, you know, it's how we, knowing how powerful our language is. So that's one of the important aspects for me, to be careful, not to be careful, to be aware of the language I'm using, so that I'm creating rather than fighting what I don't want.
Love it.
You know, this again is another different way of looking at things, and that's, as you say, you know, we're learning. There's still a lot to learn, you know, because for the most part we've been unlearning certainly in the last 5 years. We've been unlearning, shedding all the conditioning. It's like, okay, well, that's not true, this isn't right, that's not true, okay, that's no, okay, just leave that to one side and keep diving through this and say, okay, well, what is there? And a lot of it is, I don't know, and okay, let's see what we can learn and look at the sorts of things that people are looking into and discovering, you know, the nature of water. It's not just H2O. There's so much more to it. The nature of consciousness, what we truly are, and what we can expand into, and how we can express it in this so-called physical reality. So that's I suppose my focus of getting sort of expanding my understanding of who we truly are and what we can do here in this life, this physical life, as we say. So yes, I mean, the most of my articles so far are on sort of health space, but I will be moving into other areas as I move forward, and also with podcasts and different conversations with different people. So so yes, dawnlester.substack.com is probably the best place to find me.
Fantastic. Well, I'll add everything into the show notes so people can track you down and follow your work. But thank you once again for this conversation. It's been great. It's been a pleasure to get to know you a little bit more, and I look forward to reading and listening and watching what's coming out next. So until we meet again and circle back for another conversations, I'll say goodbye and thank you very much for this time we had today.
Thank you very much, Adrian. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Thank you. I really appreciate it. And you've asked me some really interesting questions. Fantastic. Thank you.
My pleasure. All right, now have a great day.